and actively deprogram ourselves, seek the truth of reality through expanding our perceptions, and focus on full remembrance of our true selves. As we begin to connect to our true selves, we will also see the truth of this illusory reality and the way it controls us through our manipulated perceptions. As soon as we fully remember our true selves, we will also see the enemy for what it is and how to rebalance the system by freeing ourselves and assisting others to do the same, creating a domino effect into the evolution of human consciousness. Welcome back to Dimensional Shift. This past week has been an incredibly freeing and joyful week for me, and I wanted to share some of the details of this ayahuasca retreat that I went on. I'm going to begin by talking about how I ended up at the retreat, which is kind of a story in and of itself, and then an explanation of the 2 nights of ceremony and some things that I have taken and integrated from it. At the beginning of August, I started opening myself up to psychedelics coming into my world. I knew that there was information that I wasn't able to access through meditation, even though I have accessed a lot more through meditation than most people have. I knew there was some deeper levels that I wanted to go into, and up until that point, I had been resistant to psychedelics because I have had addiction problems in the past, and I didn't want that to snowball. And so I was being very careful about when and where and why they were coming into my life. It was a very conscious choice, and I knew I needed it to be something sacred, something meaningful, and not just a random trip somewhere. So I began getting these messages in August that I needed to go to Colorado. Don't know why, just needed to go to Colorado. I got signs everywhere from walking into a store and having a song that I had never heard called Colorado play on the loudspeaker. I saw Colorado license plates everywhere. There were so many signs that it was ridiculous. There was no way to ignore them. So I began to plan a trip. I was going to stay out by South Fork, which is further west into the Rockies. And I began to pack and start thinking about how long I wanted to stay and what I would do and everything. And for some reason, my trip got sort of halted or canceled. Something came up within me that made me pause for a while. And because of that pause, I ended up going through my period. Sorry if that's TMI, but my period came. And so I said, okay, well, that's why I needed to wait. So as soon as my period was gone, I was ready to actually get prepared to go to Colorado. I left for Colorado right at the end of September, and I was planning on just going up into the mountains, spending a couple of weeks hanging out, meditating on the mountaintop is what I told my son. I had a whole list of questions that I wanted answers to, and I didn't know if I was going to be able to find them all. But I was wanting to try, and I desperately needed a break away from the heavy energy of our home. So once I found this public lands to park on, I was there a couple of nights, and I noticed that there was another person camped kind of around the corner behind some rock, and that people came and went a little bit. And I started to wonder if this person was dealing something. I never approached them. I didn't ask any awkward questions, but just the fact that they were there made my mind start to think. Now, another sync happened before I had even left for Colorado, and that is I created a meetup group. And when I was creating this meetup group, I noticed that there was an ayahuasca ceremony place up in Canada. So I thought, well, I can look into them and see if I could do ayahuasca up there. That's not very far, really. And so while I was beginning to research on my very limited internet access, I discovered by complete chance that there was an ayahuasca retreat right there in Colorado. And not even right there in Colorado, it was 30 miles from where I had been parking and would be parking for the next 2 weeks. So this rabbit trail led me to this ayahuasca retreat, and as soon as I signed up, I knew that that's why I had gone to Colorado. And so I spent the next 2 weeks getting myself in a good spiritual, mental space, setting my intentions, understanding what I was hoping to gain, all of that kind of thing. I spent a great deal of time releasing expectations because I knew expectations were not going to be beneficial for going into a ceremony like this. But the irony is, expectations can creep in the strangest of ways. So this, I'm going to read you now a little bit of a write-up that I have provided for my Discord and for a couple of friends. Just so you're aware, there is a lot of TMI in here, but I feel like it's really important to share those parts because, number one, this is what's required of the path. This type of total surrender is required of this path. And number two, I'm hoping that by sharing my messy process, you too will also understand that if you go through this process and you make these messes, it's okay. And that on the other side of these messes, it is incredibly freeing. So we stayed at a campground by Woodland Park, and as soon as I walked in, I could tell that the space they cleansed was really powerful and intense. It was intoxicating, really. It felt amazing, and we spent several hours getting organized and getting to know each other. I did a lot of people watching during this time. We finally settled into ceremony and started with hape. Hape is really fascinating as it instantly cleared my mind of all thought, similar to states in deep meditation that I've been working on, but I was listening to others and engaging. It was very spacious in my mind. And I feel like that would be a goal of mine, is to achieve that and embody that full time as part of who I want to become, because it is so spacious. You are able to fully listen to the other person without worrying about what you're going to say next. And it's an incredible feeling just to have no thoughts. The elders, Juan and Santiago, told a little bit about themselves and ayahuasca, and we were given out our first cup. Now, either before the first cup or right after I had taken the first cup, I had one of those warning tones that comes in as a sharp tone in my right ear. At the time I made note of it, I didn't think about it too much. I was going to go forward with it no matter what happened anyway, so it was just kind of a, hello, something's going to go awry tone. I sat down on my mat to wait. They recommended we allow the medicine to get to know us by telling our life story to it, and it may also allow us to find things to heal. I started through some memories, but I have so heavily deprogrammed all of that it didn't make much sense. I finally started speaking about my essence, and the last thought I had was, I just want to help people, that's all. That's when everything started getting a little bit wonky. The first thing I remember is feeling like I was sliding off of my mat to the side without actually moving. So it was disorienting. But I also felt the need to purge then. So I got up as the medicine hit and went over to the purge bucket. I began having visuals while I was throwing up. I saw evil clowns in kaleidoscopic patterns, and this angry voice began screaming at me. So one of my intentions was to understand what the parasite that each of us has or is subjected to, or whatever it is, these archons, these inner archons, all of that, what they are. And this angry voice began screaming at me, do you really want to know what the parasite is? The parasite is you. The parasite is in you. I was really confused, and the ayahuasca made it even more confusing, but the vision changed to all the places since I'd signed up for the retreat, where I demonstrated hubris, pride, and even arrogance. It was quite an ugly look at all of the places that I thought I knew better than God. There was this element as well that it was meant to show me that this kind of hubris, feeling like we know better than God, is what has caused us to come to this point collectively. I finished purging and made my way back over to my mat. I laid back down and was sort of spinning out of control in a lot of ways. I was trying to get myself under control when I decided I needed to purge again, so I got back up. At this point, retrospect tells me I was hyperventilating. I didn't make it back to the bucket, but passed out on the floor, hitting my head. The facilitators came over and tried to revive me. They have this spray they use to pull people out of places they don't want to be in. After I revived a bit, they tried to get me up, but now the purge had moved into diarrhea and I started to shit myself. I told them I needed to go to the bathroom, so they helped me start to stand, but I blacked out again. I remember convulsing at this point, but I'm not sure it was a physical convulsion, but rather some kind of energetic or spiritual release. I came to again and couldn't hear anything. It was like wearing a glass helmet, and everything was so dark. The lights had all been shut off, but I had seen in the dark before, but now I could see almost nothing. They helped me to the bathroom, and one of the women stayed with me. I had a serious purge, and I blacked out twice more on the toilet. Each time I saw what I thought was the tunnel of light, so I was pretty sure I was dying. The only thing I could think about was, if I die here, my son will never understand. I finally got cleaned up, and they wanted me to go back to my mat. I stood up, passed out, and fell again. They revived me, and I was finally able to stand up and get back to my mat with help. The rest of the night I spent in review of all of my arrogance about the retreat and the medicine and this terrible feeling about my son. I didn't take a second cup. I also managed to convince myself that I probably had a concussion and needed to have my head looked at so I would be safe to drive home. I decided that it probably wasn't safe for me to take any more ayahuasca and that I'd leave in the morning. After breakfast and integration circle, I was getting dressed and one of the facilitators came in to clean the bathroom. He asked how I was feeling and we talked for a second, and I admitted I was thinking about leaving. He said of everyone there, the facilitators were the most excited about what had happened to me because of my total surrender to it. He encouraged me to stay, saying that night 1 represents death and night 2 rebirth. His words were said with such compassion and open-heartedness that all my fears were allayed, so I stayed. The facilitator who had helped me in the bathroom the night before asked me if I was on my period. It had started Monday, and it was about 7 to 10 days early. She said the medicine works in mysterious ways, but that I could try a half dose since the moontime can intensify energies. She also offered to sage me before my ceremony. So with more protection in place, I was looking forward to night 2. I told a couple friends as I began integrating what had happened night 1 that I felt totally exercised. Whatever was within me that was full of arrogance, pride, greed, knowing better than God was gone. For night 2, I started with just a half a cup. I lay down immediately. I surrendered to whatever it was I needed to know. I still wanted to know Source, to understand who it is, why we are here, but I didn't have expectations. It began with visuals, going to some dimension of chaotic information. I didn't want to get stuck looking at pretty visuals all night, so I kept asking for more, for truth. The idea of the light I saw kept coming back to me, so I decided to follow it. I realized the body has its own intelligence to breathe and keep living, so I totally surrendered to allowing it to continue while I did other things. I followed the light. It took a while, but I ended up in this dimension or realm that I was shown briefly but wasn't allowed to keep memory of. It was supposed to be sort of like heaven, where the truth of Source lies. The memory of that place is gone, but I was shown that the true self isn't found through expanding outwards or by trying to understand who we are outside of this matrix, but that this heaven swells within us, in our chest center. If hell is a state of mind, heaven is a state of heart. It was intense, and I was overcome with deep gratitude. Things eased down a little as I began to explore the dimension of sound. With my eyes closed, I could feel every vibration of every sound made. Eventually, I had visuals of it, of how each sound made is a consciousness, human or otherwise, sending messages to other consciousnesses, and that the space between is full of these messages, information, even more than just sound. I took another half cup. This time I began to feel absolute joy. I began laughing at each insight and understanding I had. I tried to keep it contained so as not to bother others, but there was so much joy, and it's all right here, right now, and we just have to take time to see it. So, a large part of the journey that I had that didn't get written here was about how we have two parts of ourselves. We have the part here in the matrix, and we have, you could say, the higher self or the true self that exists within the matrix, but also outside the matrix. And while they're never fully embodied here in the matrix, they have enough parts of them in the matrix that the matrix part of us can receive these messages. And the whole system that I was shown was that the higher self or the true self is constantly calling to us, constantly leaving clues and inviting us back into this realm of absolute life and joy and, freedom. Everything that we long for in this life is there, and it's all right here in front of us. We just don't access it because we're not willing to separate from this part of ourselves that has to have the control, that has to have the understanding, that has to know the mechanics of it, that has to know the how, why, what. When we integrate that part of ourselves that's wild and free and chaotic and doesn't need to make sense, it just is, then the questions don't matter, and the questions can impede us from accessing that. The first night, I had this question that I kept thinking over and over. If I can't truly be limited, then why can't my consciousness break through this matrix? I knew I was an unlimited being, but I still had some kind of glass ceiling on me that I wasn't able to break through. And I kept saying, why? What am I not doing? What's still there? And I kept getting this answer. It's because you're still asking why. It's because you're still trying to figure out what. It's these questions that are keeping you from the answer, because the answer is just to be. The answer isn't really a riddle. It's just there. And so once I was able to surrender, and this was a process in the beginning where I had to understand my spirit has to be able to be held by and trust my body, and my body has to remember to be held by and trust the earth. That was very, very important in the beginning stages of the surrender. If my spirit doesn't trust my body, for my body to keep functioning despite whatever realm I'm in, and if my body holds all that tension and tries to keep itself safe on its own, there's going to be a lot more stagnant energy. It's not going to flow nearly as well as if the body is sprawled out on the floor, totally relaxed. Okay, and so the paradigm that I was working within was the divine masculine and the divine feminine. And what I was shown was something like this. And this is just a paradigm. There's no shaming the masculine. There's no putting the feminine on a pedestal, right? This is just a paradigm to work with. You can use whatever words you want to use for these two polarities. So what I was shown is that the divine feminine is this raw creative power, and she creates things for the pure joy of creating it. She doesn't judge the things that she creates. If she creates something that could be harmful, then it could be harmful. It doesn't mean it shouldn't be created. The divine masculine, on the other hand, who is more protection-centered, will look at something that's been created and say, that could be harmful. And so this interesting dance that I saw was that the divine feminine was creating and creating and creating, and it didn't matter what, but the masculine felt responsible for, quote, cleaning up her mess. And so if you take Earth as something that was created by the divine feminine, and the divine masculine judged it as too chaotic, too whatever it is, it was a mess to be cleaned up. And so the divine masculine has been trying to make order out of the chaos. And so why we have cities, that's why we have infrastructure, that's why we have rules and laws and regulations and all of this. And at some point, the divine feminine told the divine masculine that a glass prison of order will eventually devolve into a glass prison of chaos. And that is where we are right now. While we may have had order for a while, we have now been devolving into this prison of chaos. And by reintegrating the feminine into this prison, we can help rebalance it. It's all about rebalancing these energies. The facilitators have some really, really fantastic live music that they were playing. And after I went through this whole divine masculine and divine feminine, and the feminine inviting things and showing me where all the clues have been left throughout history, and why had always had been men, and now we're shifting into it's going to be more women showing the way, because it's the way the paradigm has changed, and it needs to be a more observable balance. But after all of that wisdom was shared with me, I was able to just sort of relax, and I relaxed into this deep joy and peace and freedom. And they were playing this incredible music, and I was still in the dimension of sound where everything was alive and every sound was alive, and the building was breathing with us, and every noise anybody made was perfectly part of this symphony. And the music started, and people were getting up and dancing. I mean, there was this one piece that everybody just loved, and they were getting up and dancing, and I wanted to get up and dance, but I didn't want to get up and dance, partly because I'm not very coordinated in this body, and partly because I quickly figured out that I could dance in spirit. I could leave my body laying on my mat and get up and dance in spirit. And it was more incredible had I gotten up and tried to dance with my body, because then I could dance with all the spirits of all the dancers who were up using their body, and I could dance with the spirits of the medicine, and I could dance with the elder spirits, and it was so absolutely incredible. And when I started to kind of come down a little bit and relax and really start working on integrating everything that I'd experienced, I laughed, years worth of laughs. I've always stifled my laughter, and I just had years and years of laughter to get out. And I cried tears of deep gratitude that you can't even imagine until you've experienced it, because it's not just an, oh, thank you, I'm so thankful for this. It is a deep sobbing that comes from your heart that you, of all people, have been blessed enough to experience something so beautiful. I'm gonna start crying, sorry. It's accessible to anybody. It's not just me, right? Each of us are chosen. When I left for this trip, I was helping my parents understand why I was leaving, and so I said, do you think we're called by God? And my mom said, do you think you're called by God? I said, I think we're all called by God, but only some of us listen. And because I've been listening, and because I've become such a willing vessel for this message of joy, peace, love, compassion, and freedom, I guess I've been blessed with some of these experiences, but there's nothing special about me. So I hope that you will continue to heal yourselves, deprogram, get rid of all of your beliefs and your identities, and start looking at the root of your suffering, which we'll be doing in the Discord a little bit. And I hope with every fiber of my being that you find this joy and peace and love, all of it that I have found, and look forward to continuing to grow. And if I can help in any way, please reach out on whatever platform you have me on, Reddit, Discord, email, whatever it is. I am very blessed to have each and every one of you in my life. Even if we've never spoken, you are still a blessing to me. I am honored that you have taken the time to listen, and I am honored that you are working through the path in your own way. Don't ever give up. It's worth it. If you found this episode helpful or insightful, please share it with a friend and leave a review or comment. Make sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. I host twice weekly open discussions on the podcast topic on our Discord server. If you'd like to join, head to dimensionalshifter.com/Discord. If you're on Reddit, come join the subreddit r/dimensionalshifters, or send me a DM. My username is Dimensional Shifter. Keep deprogramming, keep connecting, keep listening to your intuition. This is it. This is what we've been searching for our whole lives. Connection to our true selves.